வணக்கம். Good evening. Welcome to the June program of the Tamil Heritage Trust. இன்றைய சொற்பொழிவு தொடங்குவதற்கு முன் தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட் தமிழ் பாரம்பரிய அறக்கட்டளையை பற்றி ஒரு சின்ன அறிமுகத்தோடும், பேச்சாளரை பற்றி ஒரு சின்ன அறிமுகத்தோடும், எங்களுடைய வரப்போகிற ஒரு நடவடிக்கையை பற்றி ஒரு சின்ன அறிமுகத்தோடும் இதை ஒரு 5 நிமிஷம் டு 10 நிமிஷத்தில் முடிச்சுட்டு அவரை பேச விடுவோம். தமிழ் பாரம்பரிய அறக்கட்டளை தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட் ஒரு 8-9 இயர்ஸாக நடந்துட்டுருக்கு. எங்களுடைய 3-4 ஆக்டிவிட்டி நடந்துகிட்ருக்கோம். தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட்னு பேர் வச்சுருந்தாலும் தமிழ் தாண்டி மற்ற இந்தியன் ஹெரிட்டேஜ்லேயும் எங்களுக்கு இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் உண்டு. மோஸ்ட்லி மேஜர் ஆக்டிவிட்டி இந்த மந்த்லி லெக்சர். ஒவ்வொரு மாதமும் முதல் சனிக்கிழமை சாயங்காலம் 5:30 மணிக்கு இந்த ஆர்கே கன்வென்ஷன் சென்டரில் லெக்சர் நடக்கும். நாங்கள் இதை ஒரு 9 வருஷமாக பண்ணிகிட்டு இருக்கோம். ஒரு 7 வருஷம் தக்கர் பாப்பான்னு டி நகரில் இந்த ஸ்கூலில் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கோம். போன்ற வருஷமாக இங்கே பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கோம். இந்த லெக்சர் டாபிக்ஸ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ரிலேட்டட் நிறைய செவரல் டாபிக்ஸ் ரிலேட்டட் ஹெரிட்டேஜ், ஆர்ட்ஸ், கல்ச்சர், லிட்ரேச்சர், சயின்ஸ், பெயிண்டிங், கிராமர், ஆர்கிடெக்சர், ஆர்கியாலஜி, எவ்ரி திங் இஸ் தேர். நிறைய டாபிக்ஸ் பேசியிருக்கோம். த ஸ்பீக்கர்ஸ் ஆர் அந்தந்த துறையில் இருக்கிற சில வல்லுநர்களும் அழைத்திருக்கிறோம், சில அமைச்சர்ஸும் அழைச்சிருக்கோம். அதை பற்றி நிறைய பேசியிருக்காங்க. யூ மே இன்ஃபேக்ட் ஒன் ஆஃப் யூ மே பி த ஸ்பீக்கர் இன் அ ஃபியூச்சர் ஈவெண்ட். இது ஒரு முக்கியமான நடவடிக்கை. இதில் நாங்கள் ஒரு லிஸ்ட் அனுப்புவோம், மெயில். நீங்கள் இந்த ப்ரோக்ராம் பற்றி தகவல் தெரிஞ்சுக்கணுன்னா நீங்கள் இமெயில் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா வில் சென்ட் யூ இமெயில் ஆன் அ மந்த்லி பேசிஸ். ஒரு வாரத்துக்கு முன்னாடி உங்களுக்கு இமெயில் வந்துடும். அதை தவிர தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட்னு ஃபேஸ்புக்கில் ஒரு பேஜ் இருக்குது. tamilheritage.in அப்படின்னு ஒரு பிளாக் இருக்குது. அந்த பிளாகில் எங்களுடைய முக்கால்வாசி பழைய லெக்சர் எல்லாத்தோடைய வீடியோவும் இருக்கும், 1-2 ஆடியோ இருக்கும். ஸோ அதில் பார்த்துக்கலாம். ஃபேஸ்புக் பேஜ் இஸ் வெரி ஆக்டிவ். ஃபேஸ்புக் பேஜில் நாங்கள் எல்லா ப்ரோக்ராமும் ஆக்டிவிட்டீஸும் போடுறோம். அதுவும் தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட் அப்படிங்கிற ஃபேஸ்புக் பேஜில் ஒரு several thousand people now subscribing to that page. இதை தவிர இது மந்த்லி 1 லெக்சர் நடக்கிற மாதிரி ஆன்யுவலாக ஒரு செட் ஆஃப் லெக்சர்ஸ் பேச்சு கச்சேரி நடத்துகிறோம். டிசம்பரில் பாட்டு கச்சேரியும் நாட்டிய கச்சேரி நடக்கிறது போல் ஒரு தலைப்பு, கலை தலைப்பு, பாரம்பரிய தலைப்புக்கு பேச்சு கச்சேரி அப்படின்னு அதை பற்றி மெயினாக லெக்சர்ஸ். அது ஒரு 5 வருஷமாக 6 வருஷமாக போயின்ட்டுருக்கு. ஃபஸ்ட்டு ஒரு சங்க இலக்கியத்துலேருந்து தமிழ்நாடுன்ற பரவலான ஒரு ஹிஸ்டாரிக்கல் பார்வை ஒரு முதல் இயர் நடத்தணும். அதுக்கப்புறம் பெயிண்டிங் ஹெரிட்டேஜ், இந்தியாவுடைய ஓவிய மரபு அப்படின்னு ஒன்று பண்ணோம் 2வது வருஷம். 3rd இயர் ஸ்ரீரங்கம் அஸ் அ சிட்டி அப்படின்னு ஒரு செட் ஆஃப் 5 days லெக்சர் பண்ணோம். அப்புறம் டாக்டர் நாகசுவாமிங்கிற ஆர்கியாலஜிஸ்ட் பல பேருக்கு தெரிஞ்சிருக்கலாம். அவரை ஆனர் பண்ணுறதுக்கு ஒரு செட் ஆஃப் ப்ரோக்ராம்ஸ் பண்ணோம். இப்போ ரீசெண்டாக டிசம்பரில் மாமல்லபுரத்தை பற்றி முன்னாடி 5 நாள் 6 நாளாக ஒரு நாளைக்கு 2 மணி நேரம் பண்ணிகிட்டு இருந்தோம். லேட்டஸ்ட்டாக நாங்கள் கொஞ்சம் ட்ரெண்டு மாற்றி, ஏன்னா ஒவ்வொரு நாளும் 5 நாளைக்கு வரது நிறைய பேர் கஷ்டமாக இருக்குது, ஸ்பீக்கர்ஸ் கோஆர்டினேட் பண்ணுறது கஷ்டமாக இருக்குதுன்னு சொல்லிட்டு இந்த டிசம்பர் லாஸ்ட் டிசம்பர் 2 நாள் ஆல் டே ப்ரோக்ராம் பண்ணோம். 10 to 5, 10 to 6 பண்ணோம். வெரி சக்ஸஸ்ஃபுல். 8-9 லெக்சர்ஸ் நடந்தது. அடுத்த வருஷம் அதாவது இந்த கம்மிங் இயர், இந்த கம்மிங் டிசம்பரில் காஞ்சிபுரம் பற்றி பண்ணலாம் அப்படின்னு இருக்கோம், பேச்சு கச்சேரி. இதை தவிர சைட் செமினார்னு ஒன்று பண்ணுறோம். சைட் செமினார்ன்றது என்னென்னா, இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு சைட்டை மாமல்லபுரம் போகிறோம், இல்லைனா அஜந்தா போகிறோம், ஸ்ரீரங்கம் போகிறோம்னா அதை டீட்டெயில்டாக ஸ்டடி பண்ணிட்டு முதல்ல போகிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி ஒரு லாங் அண்ட் டீட்டெயில் ஸ்டடி. அது என்ன பண்ணுவோன்னா, நாங்கள் போகிறது ஒரு 30 பேர் 40 பேர் போகிறோன்னா அதுக்கு மேலே போக முடியாது. அதுக்கு மேலே போனால் ப்ராப்பராக அதை ஸ்டடி பண்ண முடியாது, ஒருத்தர் எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ண முடியாது. ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இடத்த சூஸ் பண்ணி அதோடைய எந்தெல்லாம் மான்யூமெண்ட்லாம் பார்க்க போகிறோம், என்ன அங்கே முக்கியமான இது தெரிவிக்க போகிறோன்றதை பற்றி ஒரு அட்வான்ஸ் குறிப்பு எடுத்துட்டு அதில் சில டாபிக்ஸ் சூஸ் பண்ணிட்டு எங்களுக்குள்ளேயே நாங்கள் ஒரு 3 to 4 months, ஒரு 10 to 12 weeks எவ்ரி சாட்டர்டே ஆர் சண்டே மீட் பண்ணி அதை பற்றி ப்ரெசன்டேஷன் பண்ணோம். இன்ஃபேக்ட் இந்த ஜனவரி நாங்கள் ஒரிசா போயிருந்தோம். போகும்பொழுது முக்கால்வாசி ஒரிசாவில் புபனேஸ்வர், கோனாரக்கில் தான் மெயினாக போயிருந்தோம், பூரி. அதை தவிர புத்திஸ்ட் மான்யூமெண்ட்ஸ் இங்கே இருக்குதுன்னு சொன்னதுனால அது ஒரு 1 day அதுக்கும் போயிட்டு வந்தோம். அப்போ அந்த ஒரிசாவில் அந்த சைட் செமினாருக்கு ப்ரிப்பரேஷன் போது பண்ண ஒரு லெக்சரை தான் இப்போ இன்னொரு வித் பிக்சர்ஸ் வித் ஆன் லொக்கேஷன் இப்போ போயிட்டு வந்த அனுபவத்தோட அதை 6 மாதம் முன்னாடி பேசினவரும் அவர் தான், ஷாம் தான் பேசினார். அவர் இப்போது வித் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் ஆஃப் ஹேவிங் கான் தேர் அவர் பேச போகிறார். So it will be almost as, it will be similar to the monthly lectures in terms of quality, except எங்களுக்கு கொஞ்சம் டைம் லிமிட்டை இது எடுத்துகிட்டு சாதாரணமாக 2.5-3 hours கூட போவோம், நாங்கள் கலந்து பேசிப்போம். இன்றைக்கி டோன்ட் வரி, இட் ஒன்ட் பி 2.5 hours டுடே. ஸோ ஹோப்ஃபுல்லி இது மேஜர் ஆக்டிவிட்டீஸ். இது தவிர 1-2 ஆக்டிவிட்டீஸ் பண்ணிகிட்டு இருக்கோம் நாங்கள். ஒன் ஆஃப் த திங்ஸ் தட் வி டூ இஸ் வி சம்டைம்ஸ் டேக் amateur tour groups or enthusiasts to sites. ஸோ இது மாதிரி நாங்கள் மாமல்லபுரம், காஞ்சிபுரம்னு தனிப்பட்ட கெப்பாசிட்டியில் போயிருக்கோம், குரூப்பாக பண்ணதில்லை. சைட் செமினார் தான் எங்களுடைய குரூப்பாக பண்ணுற ஆக்டிவிட்டி. தனிப்பட்டு கொஞ்சம் அனுபவித்ததுனால சில பேர்லாம் போயிட்டு வந்திருக்கோம். இப்போ இந்த லேட்டஸ்ட்டாக இப்போ வந்து ஜூன் மாதம் we are going to do what we call training of docents. டோசன்ட் அப்படிங்கிறது வந்து ஒரு இடத்த வந்து டீட்டெயில்டாக டூர் கொடுக்குறவர். இது ப்ரொஃபஷ்னல் கைட்ஸ் எல்லா இடத்துலையும் இருக்காங்க. அவங்களோட நாங்கள் இன்டர்ஃபியர் பண்ணவோ கம்பீட் பண்ணவோ விருப்பம் இல்லை. இன்ஃபேக்ட் எங்களுடைய ஃபவுண்டர் ப்ரொஃபஸர் சுவாமிநாதன் வந்து மாமல்லபுரத்தில் இருக்கிற அந்த டூரிஸ்ட் கைட்ஸ் ப்ரொஃபஷன்ஸாக இருக்காங்க இல்லையா, அவங்களுக்கோசரம் டூரிசம் கவர்மெண்ட் ஆஃப் தமிழ்நாடுவே சொல்லி அவங்களுக்கு வந்து ஒரு டூரிசம் செஷன் நடத்தினார். அங்கே மான்யூமெண்ட்ஸில் என்ன இருக்குதுன்னு சொல்லிட்டு முக்கால்வாசி அந்த மான்யூமெண்ட்ஸ்க்கு வர்றவங்கெல்லாம், மாமல்லபுரத்துக்கு ஸ்பெசிஃபிக்காக வர்றவங்க வந்து ஒரு மணி நேரம் 1.5 மணி நேரத்துக்கு மேலே அதை பார்க்க விரும்பலை. ஒரு 2 hours அவங்களுக்கு ஹீட்டே ஒன்றும் இல்லைனாலும் ஹீட் வந்து டயர்ட் அவுட் பண்ணிவிடும் முக்கால்வாசியாக பேரை. செகண்ட், அவங்க அதில் ஒரு சின்ன செக்மெண்ட்டு தான் பார்ப்பாங்க. ஷோர் டெம்பிள், 5 ரதாஸ், அர்ஜுனாஸ் பெனன்ஸ், மகிஷாசுர மர்தினி மண்டபம், அந்த பட்டர் பால் அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு பெரிய மேஜர் இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட்டாக இருக்கும். ஸோ இதுதான் பார்த்துட்டு இருப்போம். திஸ் இஸ் ஃபைன். இது வந்து முக்கால்வாசி டூரிஸ்ட்க்கு ஓகே. ஆனால் கொஞ்சம் ரொம்ப ஆர்வமாக போகிற விரும்புகிறவங்க, ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் நான் வந்து குமரகுரு காலேஜ்னு ஒரு இருக்குது, அங்கே வந்து சிவில் இன்ஜினியரிங் படிக்கிறவங்களே வந்து இந்தியன் ட்ரெடிஷ்னல் ஆர்கிடெக்சர் படிக்கிறவங்களும் இருக்காங்க. அந்த ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ் வந்திருந்தாங்க. அவங்களுக்கு நான் வந்து ஒரு டூராக கூட்டிகிட்டு போயிருந்தேன். அவங்களால கூட ஒரு 4 மணி நேரம் தான் ஸ்பேர் பண்ண முடிஞ்சுது. ஏன்னா அவங்களுக்கு தே ஹேட் அதர் டைம் திஸ் திங். அந்த 4 மணி நேரத்துலேயே வந்து நான் ஒரு சில ஷோர் டெம்பிளை மிஸ் பண்ணிவிட்டு மற்ற இடத்த தான் சொல்ல முடிஞ்சுது. இதோட மாதிரி ஒரு நாள் ஆர் ஹாஃப் அ டே 2 hours போகாமல் ஒரு நாள் 2 நாள் போகிற விரும்புகிறவங்களுக்கும், இல்லை இதை லொக்கேஷனில் தான் போய் சொல்லணுன்ட்டு இல்லை, மாமல்லபுரத்தை பற்றி என்ன இருக்குதுன்னு ஒரு பள்ளிக்கூடத்துலேயோ ஒரு கம்பெனிலேயோ ஒரு காலேஜ்லேயோ போய் சொல்லலாம். ஒரு ஆர்ட் எந்தூசியாஸ்டிக் அமைச்சர் குரூப்லேயோ போய் எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணலாம். அது எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணுறதுக்குன்னா அதுக்கு ஒரு லெவல் ஆஃப் நாலேஜ் வேணும். சுவாமிநாதன் சார் மாமல்லபுரத்தை பற்றி புக் எழுதியிருக்கார், ஒரு நல்ல ஒண்டர்ஃபுல் புக் இருக்குது. அதை மாதிரி எத்தனையோ பேர் ரொம்ப ப்ரொஃபஷனல் ரிசர்ச்சர்ஸ் நிறைய புக் எழுதியிருக்காங்க. அதை ஒரு டீட்டெயில் ப்ரோக்ராமாக நாங்கள் சைட் செமினாரில் 3 நாள் பார்த்தோம் மாமல்லபுரத்தில். அதில் முக்கால்வாசி தான் பார்த்தோம். அதுலேயே நாங்களே ஒரு 4 மான்யூமெண்ட்டை மிஸ் பண்ணிட்டு தான் வந்தோம். ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி இல்லாமல் கொஞ்சம் இன்டெப்த்தாக விரும்புகிறவங்களுக்கும் மற்றவங்களுக்கு சொல்ல கூடியவர்களுக்கும் ஒரு ப்ரோக்ராமை இப்போ நாங்கள் பண்ண போகிறோம். ஸோ அதில் முக்கால்வாசி அந்த ஸ்லாட்ஸ் நிறைய ஒரு 15 பேர் தான் கூப்பிட்டு போகிறோம். ஜூன் 17th and 18th நீங்கள் யூ கேன் ஆஸ்க் ஃபார் டீட்டெயில்ஸ் ஃப்ரம் மீ ஆர் பத்ரி ஆர் ஷாம் லேட்டர். 17th and 18th ஒரு ப்ரோக்ராமும், 24th and 25th ஒரு 2 பார்ட்ஸாக மாமல்லபுரத்துக்கு அந்த டோசன்ட் ட்ரைனிங் பண்ண போகிறோம். திஸ் இஸ் நாட் ஃபார் தி நார்மல் டூரிஸ்ட். We are not going to let you take photographs. There is a payment fee. You can discuss that with them later. அங்கே போய் ஓவர் நைட் ஸ்டே பண்ணி பார்த்து டீட்டெயில்டாக டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணி, அதாவது காதுலேருந்து மாமல்லபுரம் வெளில வர வரைக்கும் பேச போகிறோம். அதை டீட்டெயில்டாக இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் நிறைய கொடுக்க போகிறோம். முக்கால்வாசி பேருக்கு அது ஜாஸ்தியாக தான் இருக்கும். பட் ரொம்ப ஆர்வப்பட்டவர்கள் இன்னும் ஒரு 5-6 ஸ்லாட் இருக்குது, நீங்கள் கேட்டு நீங்கள் ஜாயின் பண்ணிக்கலாம். ஸோ திஸ் இஸ் அ பேசிக் செட் ஆஃப் வாட் வி ஆர் டூயிங் அண்ட் திஸ் இஸ் அவர் ஆக்டிவிட்டி ஃபார் திஸ் மந்த். இது முடிச்சுட்டு இதை தவிர வந்து கண்டினியூடாக சுவாமிநாதன் சார் யூஎஸ்லேருந்து திரும்பி வந்த உடனே வி மே ஹேவ் அ கப்பல் ஆஃப் செஷன்ஸ் ஆஃப்டர் தட். ஒரு லெக்சர் செஷனாக அதை பற்றி இன்னொரு, ஏன்னா முதல்ல என்ன இருக்குதுன்னு முதல்ல பார்த்துட்டு வர்றது, அங்கே கொஞ்சம் ஓரளவுக்கு டிஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணிட்டு தென் யூ கேன் கோ ஃபார் அ கிரேட்டர் டெப்த் அப்படின்ட்டு. அகெயின், not to compete with the professional guides or the amateur tourist, that is not the point. It is to give an in-depth knowledge for people who also want to give more information on this. So that's the program. So ஷாம் பற்றி ஒரு ப்ரீஃப் ஒரு இன்ட்ரடக்ஷன் இமெயிலே வந்தது. அதை தாண்டி நானும் ஒன்றும் சொல்ல போகிறதில்ல. அவர் வந்து முருகப்பா குரூப்பில் ஒர்க் பண்ணுறார். நான் சொன்னேன் இல்லையா, சில அமைச்சர்ஸ் சில ப்ரொஃபஷனல்ஸ்னு. அவர் இந்த மாதிரி எங்களை மாதிரி இது மாதிரி ஒரு எந்தூசியாஸ்டிக்காக ஒரு 4-5 சைட் செமினாருக்கு வந்தவர். ஒரு ஓவர் எந்தூசியாஸ்டிக் ஆர் abundant ஆஃப் enthusiasm அப்படின்னு வந்த ஒரு ஆர் இந்த வியாதி வந்த எங்களை மாதிரி வியாதி வந்த ஒரு பார்ட்டிசிபெண்ட், ஒரு eager enthusiast. அவர் திஸ் இஸ் his ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பப்ளிக் ஸ்பீச் ஃபார் THT in the sense that நம்ம மந்த்லி லெக்சரில் அது கூப்பிடுறோம். அவர் ரொம்ப நாளாக கேட்டுட்டு இருக்கோம். அவர் வந்து குஜராத் போகும்போது அவர் தான் குஜராத் ஆர்கனைஸ் பண்ணார். இந்த டியூஜே ட்ரிப்பும் இந்த திராவிட உத்கல யாத்ரான்ற இந்த ஒரிசா ட்ரிப்பும் அவர் தான் ஆர்கனைஸ் பண்ணார். அவருடைய ஒரு லெக்சருடைய டெப்த் அண்ட் பிரெட்த் இஸ் ஜஸ்ட் அஸ்டவுண்டிங். புத்தர் சமயம் பற்றி, புத்தருடைய ஐகானோகிராஃபி பற்றி இந்த லெக்சர் அவர் கொடுக்குறச்ச ஒரு என்ன சொல்கிறது, ஒரு பிரமிப்பு தான் எங்களுக்குன்னு சொல்லணும். அவ்வளோ இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் இருந்தது. இதுக்கு முன்னாடி தமிழ் ஹெரிட்டேஜ் ட்ரஸ்ட்லேயே இது ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணும்போது இப்போ ஒரு லாஸ்ட் இயர் ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் பாதாமிக்கு போயிருந்தோம். பாதாமியில் இருக்கிற நாகர விமானங்களை பற்றி அவ்வளோ டீட்டெயில்டாக ஒரு அவ்வளோ கன்சைஸாக பட் வெரி டீட்டெயில்டு ஒரு ப்ரெசன்டேஷன் பண்ணார். அண்ட் couple of years before that குஜராத் போகும்போது மொதேரா சன் டெம்பிள் பற்றி ஒரு அவுட்ஸ்டாண்டிங் ப்ரெசன்டேஷன். இந்த வாட்டியே ஒரிசா போகும்போது முக்தேஸ்வரா பற்றியும் ஒரு முக்தேஸ்வரன் ஒரு டெம்பிள் இருக்குது ஒரிசாவில், புவனேஸ்வரில், அதை பற்றியும் ஒரு அவுட்ஸ்டாண்டிங் மாவலஸ் லெக்சர் கொடுத்தார். இன்னும் டீட்டெயிலாக பேசுகிறத விட அவர் சொல்கிறதே பெட்டர்னு தோணுது. அதனால் வித் மச் ஃபர்தர் அடோ இன்வைட் ஷாம் டு ப்ரெசன்ட் திஸ்.
Thank you, Gopo, for that very generous introduction. என்னை வந்து பத்ரி இந்த பேச்சுக்கு அழைக்கும்போது எனக்கு ஃபஸ்ட்டு தாட், இதுக்கு முன்னாடி இங்கே நடந்த ஒரு பேச்சு தான் ஞாபகம் வந்தது. அதுலேருந்து ஒரு சின்ன கிளிப்பை நான் வந்து ப்ளே பண்ண விரும்புகிறேன். இது வந்து திரு SL நரசிம்மன் அவர்கள் இங்கே பேசும்போது ஒன்று போட்டார். அது எனக்கு
இவ்விஷயம் எளிதானதல்ல, இது கடினமானதுதான். இந்த ஆய்வை அளிக்க தகுதியுள்ளவர் ராக ஞானம் மிகுந்தவராக இருக்க வேண்டும், லட்சணம் தெரிந்தவராக இருக்க வேண்டும். ஆனா குருது லட்சணம் இல்லாம லட்சணத்தை லட்சியத்தை சேர்த்து சொல்லக்கூடிய தகுதியுடையவராக இருக்க வேண்டும். மூதறிஞராகவும் இருக்க வேண்டும். ஏனால் நேற்று முளைச்ச காளான் எல்லாம் இதை பத்தி பேச ஆரம்பிச்சதுன்னா அது அர்த்தம் இல்லை.
இது வந்து டாக்டர் VV ஸ்ரீவத்சா மியூசிக் அகாடமியில் ஒரு லெக்டமில் ஒருத்தர் இன்ட்ரடியூஸ் பண்ணும்போது பேசுகிறார். ஸோ இது போல் தகுதி இல்லை என்று தெரிந்தும் நேற்று முளைத்த காளானின் பட்டியலில் கட்டாயமாக அதில் இருப்போம் என்று தெரிந்தும் என்னை இந்த பேச்சுக்கு அழைத்து இந்த வாய்ப்பை கொடுத்தமைக்கு எனக்கு பத்ரிக்கும் கோப்புக்கும் நான் ரொம்ப நன்றி சொல்லிக்கிறேன். ஐம் ஆல்சோ வெரி தேங்க்ஃபுல் டு டாக்டர் ப்ரொஃபஸர் சுவாமிநாதன், ஹூ இஸ் நாட் ஹியர் டுடே, இஸ் ட்ராவலிங் ஓவர்சீஸ், ஃபார் என்கரேஜிங் ஆல் ஆஃப் அஸ். நம்ம போல் ஆர்வலர்கள்லாம் ஊக்குவித்து இது போல் படிக்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்கிறது வந்து இட்ஸ் அ யூனிக் ட்ரைட் ஆஃப் THT, and I'm very thankful to him as well. Okay, so today we'll talk of Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri. This is not a talk about Buddhism, because somebody called and asked me today or yesterday, Buddhism பற்றி பேச போகிறீங்களே, philosophy அதெல்லாம் இருக்குமான்னு. No, it is a very, the material aspects of Buddhism பற்றி நம்ம பேச போகிறோம். It is not the metaphysical aspects. And as Gopu already mentioned, this is from our visit to Orissa. புத்திசம் பற்றி பார்க்குறதுக்கு ஒரிசா போகணுமா அப்படிங்கிறது இல்லை, நாங்கள் ஒரிசா போயிட்டு வந்து அதை பார்த்ததுனால அதை பற்றி பேசுகிறோம், அவ்வளோதான். ஸோ இட் இஸ் மோர் தேட். Okay, so where is this place that we're talking of? Also, I'm going to talk about only these three places, Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri, which is now being marketed as the Diamond Triangle, because the Golden Triangle of Bhubaneswar, Konarak and Puri already exists in tourism circles in Orissa. They are now marketing this, Orissa tourism is now marketing this as the Golden Triangle. So we are going to see only the parts of Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri, right? So இது எங்கே இருக்குன்னா, ஒரு புவனேஸ்வரிலிருந்து ஒரு about 2.5 hours of road travel past Cuttack. You can see those three places there. Those three dots are, each of them is about 10-15 kilometers from the other. Each of them is on a small hillock, and it's a vast place. So it is not one temple or one small enclosure or compound or something like that. It's a huge, vast place. As you see some of the photographs that we see there now, you will also understand the scope of this place. So what we will cover today is a brief history of what this Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri, Udayagiri is all about. Then we will look at the structures that are there, right? The stupas and all of that. And then we'll look at the sculptures, the icons and the iconography of Buddhism in general. That's the broad idea. Yeah. So Buddhist site nu pathina Orissa தடுக்க வேண்டியதா இருக்கு. There are over 50-60 places in Orissa within a few kilometers of each other where enormous number of Buddhist sculptures and structures and things like that have been found. So therefore, the temptation is to think therefore there's a lot of literature, a lot of inscriptional evidence, etc. அதுதான் கிடையாது. So Orissa is particularly short of inscriptions, இந்த கல்வெட்டுகள், செப்பேடுகள் இதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப கம்மி. So therefore, hardly anything is known about the spread of Buddhism in Orissa. So which is a starting point for us. But there are lots of places, lots of sculptures and so on. ஸோ இப்போ நம்ம ஒரு தமிழ்நாட்டில் ஒரு கோயில் போனோம்னா ஒரு சோழர் காலத்து, இது பல்லவர் காலத்துது, இது பாண்டிய நாட்டுது அப்படின்லாம் சொல்கிறோம். அந்த மாதிரி சொல்ல முடியாத ஒரு situation is what exists in Orissa. So is this a Chola structure or a Pallava structure? We don't know. However, what we do know is that these places have a very long history, right? So the more they dig, the more excavations they do, the older the artifacts that they are throwing up in these locations. So நீங்கள் லலிதகிரி பார்த்தீங்கன்னா 2nd century CE இப்போ they have been able to establish from pottery shards and even maybe the structure, the central stupa of Lalitagiri seems to be from the 2nd and 3rd century CE. Apart 5th, 6th century CE, definitely you will see some of the sculptures which have very much the Gupta grace, the Gupta simplicity and so on. The bulk of the sculptures and structures are between the 8th and 10th centuries. And then of course the activity continues till the 12th century, 11th, 12th century வரைக்கும் அங்கே sculptures இருக்கு. Ratnagiri பார்த்தீங்கன்னா probably from the 5th century ன்னு ஒரு guess, it is not confirmed. What is confirmed is more the 10th century and the 13th century kind of walls. But 5th centuryலேருந்து continuous occupation இருக்கு அப்படின்ட்டு ஒரு the current thinking is that. Udayagiri is the youngest of the lot. And it starts from about the 7th, 8th century, and then there was continuous occupation till the 12th century. Of course, you may ask what happened after the 12th century. After the 12th century, Buddhism more or less vanished. So it sort of went north, went to Tibet, was forced out, and then there was not much Buddhist activity in anywhere in the country. So given this long history, so these are places in continuous occupation for close to 1,000 years, right? From somewhere in the 2nd century to somewhere in the 12th century. That is the broad thrust of what they are finding from archaeological excavations. Therefore, who are the kings involved? So when we say this, Shodargala, Pallavargala, etc., one thing we know is that the bulk of the sculptures and structures have been from the 8th, 9th, 10th century. Therefore, அந்த ஏரியாவில் அப்போ ஆண்டவர்கள் யாருன்னா பௌமகாராஸ். So again, the Bhaumakaras' exact dates are not clear. Roughly mid-8th century to mid-10th century, 200 years they have been there is known. That is one reason why we think these structures would have been supported by the Bhaumakaras. The second reason is the first 3 Bhaumakara kings were Buddhists. So Kshevankara Deva, Shivakara Deva, Shubhakara Deva and 3 பேர் இருந்தாங்க. Those kings were Buddhists. That is attested by copper plates. Not found here but elsewhere. அவங்க இந்த மாதிரி புத்த விஹாரங்களுக்கு they have given donations and so on ங்கிறது தெரியுது. Also, subsequently, about 2 of their successors, not immediate successors, but subsequent Shubhakara Deva, the 4th, Shivakara Deva, the 3rd, they were also Buddhists. This we know, therefore we think that the Bhaumakaras must have supported this particular set of monasteries during their reign. They were followed by Somavamshis, who were followed by the Eastern Gangas. Somavamsis were all staunch Hindus, Eastern Gangas were all staunch Hindus. However, since there seems to be continued activity, there is the archaeologists and other scholars have come to the conclusion that these kings, non-Buddhist kings, also supported Buddhism. So, ஒரு general tolerance இருந்திருக்கு, ஒரு general support for Buddhism seems to have been there in that area. So that is broadly the history of the place itself. Looking at the archaeological history, this was a relatively late find. It was found only in 1870. When I say found, rediscovered, or the earliest report, it is only from about 1870. Why is that late? Because the first stupa found was in Amaravati, which was 1797 by none other than Colin Mackenzie. Colin Mackenzie 1797 அமராவதியை பார்க்கும் பொழுது அவருக்கு புத்திசம்னு ஒன்று இருக்குன்னே தெரியாது. Broadly, he published a paper and he wrote an essay calling it a Jain monument because he had been to Savanabelagola, he had been to Mudabidri, he had been to other places in Karnataka and met Jains, practicing Jains. He had met Jain priests who told him about all this. இங்கே வந்து அதே மாதிரி ஒரு தியான போஸ்டில் there are some pictures and so on. So he assumed it was Jain. It was, however, by 1818, 1819, Sanchi, Ajanta were rediscovered by the British, and by that time, Sanchi was established to be Buddhist. In fact, there is a very interesting exchange of letters between Edward Fell, who first described Sanchi, and Colin Mackenzie and his secretary. நீங்களும் பார்த்து நாங்கள் பார்த்து ஒரே மாதிரி இருக்கே, ரெண்டும் ஒன்றா இருக்குமோ, அது இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் டீட்டெயில் அனுப்புங்க அப்படின்னு they are writing letters to each other. Then, unfortunately, both of them die. So by 1821, both of them are dead. Mackenzie's detailed report on Amaravati is published after he dies, after his death in 1823, where he has hinted that this could be Buddhist. Right? However, by the time of 1870, everything is known about Buddhism. Sanchi, etc., have been completely explored. Ajanta has been explored. Bharut has been found. Etc. Alexander Cunningham has taken over the ASI, the beginnings of the ASI. So, அதனால by the time of Lalitagiriயில் வந்து இந்த CS Banerjeeங்கிற deputy magistrate போய் பார்க்கும் பொழுது Buddhism is well established, meaning it is known that all over South India and all over India Buddhism was there. So this Mr. Banerjee was the first man to go there. He was followed by the magistrate of Cuttack, Mr. John Beams. And அப்போ வந்து the prevailing thought was இதெல்லாம் இங்கே விட்டாக்கா people will destroy it, so நம்ம எடுத்துன்னு போயிடணுன்ட்டு. So John Beams started the removal of material from Lalitagiri and he started moving it to Cuttack. So there is one set of sculptures still which are called the Beams collection, which are everywhere. So artifacts from these areas are now available in Calcutta Museum, Patna Museum, Cuttack, Bhubaneswar Museum, and maybe in a few other parts of the country. Then for the next 40-50 years, nothing happened. Then in 1930, the superintendent of Indian Museum, Calcutta, R.P. Chanda, he went there, he wrote a detailed report and so on. Finally, in 1958, excavation started in Ratnagiri. And it started in Ratnagiri because they wanted to prove the presence or absence of a place called Pushpagiri, which Yuan Sang had written about. So Pushpagiriன்னு ஒரு இடம் இருக்கு அப்படிங்கிறது என்ன, அது எங்கே இருக்குன்னு கண்டுபிடிப்போம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி they started it. By the time they started in Lalitagiri, it was a full 100 years from the time of discovery. 1870s is when Lalitagiri was first spotted. 1977 or so is when it was excavated. So that is the broad history of excavation there. Since then, with every dig, as I said, they are finding more and more things about the place. Okay. So அங்கே என்ன பார்க்கலாம் போனா? The Buddhists built three things very broadly, right? They built stupas, they built chaityas, and they built viharas. Stupa is a religious monument, mostly a memorial monument. Chaityas are prayer halls with stupas inside. Right? A smaller stupa inside the chaitya. And the vihara is a monastery, or madam. So where the monks stayed, where the bhikshukal lived and worked and prayed and things like that. So these are the three basic structures that the Buddhists built or excavated, as the case may be, over centuries. So let us see each one of them, what they mean. Of these, the stupa is the most important structure. Stupa comes from the word Sanskrit root of stup, which is to collect and therefore to heap. Almost invariably, it is a memorial to somebody, an enlightened soul or a senior bhikshu or somebody like that. In most cases, the stupa is raised over a relic of some human being. The stupa goes back to before Buddha's days. Buddha himself seems to have erected or recommended the erection of stupas for some of his disciples, especially Moggallana and Sariputta. So the idea of a stupa as a memorial for people is a truly ancient idea. Subsequently, of course, the stupa became of great importance to Buddhists. People even say children playing with the sand, if they build a stupa, they will get punya. So that kind of concepts started spreading around the stupa. This photo, of course, is the most famous stupa of them all, the Sanchi stupa, which has been lovingly and beautifully reconstructed and renovated for us. So there are three types of stupas, very broadly. One is the Saririka stupa. The Saririka stupa is a stupa raised over the relics of a enlightened one. The second is an Uddesika stupa, which is a stupa to commemorate an event. Sometimes இந்த ராஜா வந்துட்டு போனதுனால ஒரு வசந்த மண்டபம் கட்டினாரு அப்படின்னு சொல்கிறோம். ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி to commemorate the event of somebody visiting something or something happening, a stupa is built. And thirdly, there is a Paribhogika stupa, which is few and far between because they are supposed to be stupas raised over the articles used by Buddha. So let us see each of them very quickly. The majorities of stupas that have been discovered are raised over relics, and they are Saririka in nature. So Buddha's bones, Buddha's teeth, Buddha's nails, Buddha's hair, various parts of the body that can last have been used as relics for building stupas. The first stupa was erected for Buddha by a set of people called Trapusha and Bhalla. So they were his first lay disciples. They were the first persons he accepted as disciples. And he gave them a piece of his hair and some nails and sent them away, with which they built a stupa. Now, we don't know where the stupa is, but it is recorded that they built a stupa. They are also interesting for another reason. They are supposed to be from a region called Ukkala. Therefore, everybody in Utkala, which is Orissa, thinks Utkala was as old as that. Except that other scholars feel that they were not even from anywhere there, they were from the northwest, in the Uttarapada ஏதோ அந்த ஏரியாவிலேருந்து வந்திருக்காங்க அப்படின்ட்டு. ஸோ தெர் இஸ் Trapusha and Bhalla are the initial stupa builders as well as probably from Utkala. There is also the legend that after Buddha's death, 8 stupas were erected for him by the 8 tribes in that area, Kushinagara, where he died. And Ashoka subsequently opened them and split it up into 84,000 pieces, and 84,000 stupas were built, etc. So these are all Saririka stupas. Next comes the Uddesika stupas. These are places visited by the Buddha or by people associated with them. For instance, in Lumbini, Ashoka has built a stupa to commemorate his visit. Typically here, the objects of worship are not relics. They are other things associated with the Buddha, the wheel, the throne, the Bodhi tree, and so on. All votive stupas. இந்த காணிக்கைகள் வேண்டுதல்களுக்காக நிறைய இடத்துல ஸ்தூபா வைப்பாங்க. நம்ம வந்து பார்க்க போகிறோம் some of the photos. They are all Uddesika stupas. There are not necessarily Saririka stupas, in the sense there are no relics in them. And finally, we have the Paribhogika stupa. There are not too many examples of this. There is supposed to be one where Buddha, on his day of enlightenment, he was first given something to break his fast. And then he threw that cup into the river. And a lady called Sujata picked up that cup. ஒரு ஸ்டோரி இருக்குது. அந்த கப்பை வச்சு ஒரு ஸ்தூபா கட்டியிருக்காங்க. That is an example of the Paribhogika stupas. All stupas, by and large, that we see around India, the large stupas are all Saririka stupas. Okay. Stupa looks like this, right? So there is one, it's circular in nature. Typically, that's all there is. Sometimes there are 2 walk-arounds around it, and that's all. So it's a very simple kind of structure. There are gateways and so on and so forth. The next thing that the Buddhists built was a Chaitya. So the Chaitya, unlike the stupa which is circular, the Chaitya is a U-shaped apsidal structure. Right? நம்ம வந்து கஜபிரஷ்ட விமானம்ங்கெல்லாம் சொல்கிறோம். So அதனுடைய probably the forerunner of those things. It's a U-shaped structure, typically pillars all around, and inside the Chaitya, this circle here or this thing that you see is a stupa. Right? This stupa can again be Saririka and so on. So let us not, we will not go there. So this stupa is again the object of worship for the people inside the Chaitya. This Chaitya is in Karli, in Maharashtra. This is in Ajanta Cave 26, and this is the cave at Baja, the Baja caves also in Maharashtra. You can see this entrance here, you can see these windows here. Scholars feel that this is the origin of the arches that we see in Kudus and so on in our South Indian temples. This arch has been retained and now features in practically all the, it's called the Chaitya arch. So in the temple architecture book, padichingana Chaitya arch and solvanga. Sometimes they will call it Kudus and so on. So this is what a Chaitya is. It is a prayer hall with a stupa at the one end of it and a lot of place for people to sit and pray. The third thing that the Buddhists built is a vihara. Vihara is nothing but a place where people, and this is the typical plan of a vihara. So there is a central shrine here, probably with a Buddha in it, just like you can see here, there is a Buddha here. Then around it, there are lots of cells. Each cell is for 1 or 2 monks to share. There is a common hall where people will all sit and pray and do their work. There are entrances, sometimes there are 2 stories and so on. So this is out of a cave, whereas what we are going to see is a structural vihara. So 3 things, stupa, Chaitya and vihara. Let's move on. So the first thing about these sites is they are huge. So this is just a panorama photo taken by, I think, VKS, who's here with us. These are huge places. They are spread over several acres. So they are not small, as I mentioned already, small monuments or anything. They are huge places. And this is a vihara plan that you see here. So let us see the stupas that we saw in this place. In Lalitagiri, if you climb this set of stairs, you come to this main stupa, which we talked about just now, what a stupa is. This is the Mahastupa at Lalitagiri. It is a fairly simple affair. It has no, all the external things that you saw, the harmika, gateway, it is a simple, circular, almost conical kind of structure. There are no sculptures, there are no other things here. However, it is a Saririka stupa and relics were found inside this. So these are the actual cups or caskets in which relics were found. This is now in the museum, it's not there, you can't see it on the site, but these relics were found. So it's a Saririka stupa, as I said. There were caskets, within each of them had 4 containers. There was finally the external one was a soapstone, adukulla or silver, adukulla or gold, adukulla or gold foil, or sila bone pieces which they have built the stupa over it, right? So this was discovered in Lalitagiri. Next we go to Ratnagiri. This is a stupa from Ratnagiri. It is not as well preserved or well reconstructed as the one at Lalitagiri is. So inga paakring illaya, these are the votive stupas. These are the votive stupas, that is kanikkayaga alla oru vendudalukkaga, where many devotees go and place stupas of this sign. Each of them will have a small picture of, small sculpture, an icon inside. It may be a Buddha, it may be a Bodhisattva, something like that. So in Ratnagiri, like this, there are some 600 votive stupas, small ones, big ones, etc. But this is the main Ratnagiri stupa. It is still not fully done. There are multiple years of or multiple centuries. So they feel the innermost is probably 5th, 6th century. The outermost is probably 13th century. And that is the extent of the history of this stupa in continuous use. This stupa is the most interesting of the 3 stupas. It is a special stupa whose தாத்பரியத்தை நான் வந்து அப்புறமா விளக்குறேன். இதில் வந்து on 4 sides of the stupa there are 4 Buddha statues or Bodhisattva statues and Buddha statues. What those statues are, I'll come to a little later. But you can see the slightly peculiar shape of this stupa because of these extra statues. So this is how it was when it was first discovered. Right? So it was just placed like that. Now that has been completed by ASI into this shape. This is at Udayagiri. This is the 3rd set of stupas that we saw. So you can walk around it. So there is a square base instead of just a round base, and it on which the stupa has been, the Mahastupa has been built. So those are the 3 stupas that we were able to see at Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri. This is how, of course, நம்ம எதுவாக இருந்தாலும் முதல்ல ஒரு கேட்டை போட்டுடணும். ஸோ கேட் போட்டாச்சு. ஸோ இட் இஸ் நவ் சேஃப், ஹோப்ஃபுல்லி, ரைட்? ஸோ okay. Next we will see the Chaitya. There is only one Chaitya in all those places, and that is at Lalitagiri. It is also the only, we said there is lots of Buddhist structures in Orissa, but this is the only apsidal Buddhist structure in Orissa which has been found till now. It's a very beautiful Chaitya. Of course, இதெல்லாம் வந்து அவங்க just ornamentally they have just arranged it. These were not found like this. They have just been arranged. These are all votive stupas. You can see hundreds of them lying around everywhere. So if you look at it from the top, this is how it is. This is where, what would have been here? A stupa would have been here, right? So this was not found until the later dig. Then they say that inside this area, what could have been an earlier stupa. So they are saying that could be 2nd, 3rd century. We don't know yet. That has to be confirmed. You can see the curvature of the structures. You can see that bricks were baked in that shape and not necessarily all square. This is not rectangular. Some of them are rectangular. Some of them in the chamfer oda they bake பண்ணிருக்காங்க. இது அதே மாதிரி அந்த curve oda bake பண்ணிருக்கிற bricks. So it's a very nice sight when you go there. Okay, so that's the only Chaitya there is in the in Orissa, and this is at Lalitagiri. Next come the viharas. Now, the viharas are the most extensive part of this entire monuments, right, of the whole areas. So let us see one by one. The vihara at Lalitagiri, there are 4 viharas in Lalitagiri, and each of them is as big, some of them are bigger. Now, Lalitagiri was called Sri Chandra Aditya Vihara. So that has been found in an inscription in one of the pedestals of Lalitagiri. Similarly, there are names for the other viharas as well. So இங்க என்ன சொல்றதுன்னா, it says Sri Chandraditya Vihara Samagra Arya Bhikshu Sangha. That is, it is meant for the entire Buddhist community regardless of the sect. Right? So Buddhism, like lots of different schools of Buddhism, lots of different sects. We'll talk about it a little later. So all Buddhists are welcome here. There is a inscription. So these are the cells, right? These are all the cells. Maybe this will give you a better picture. Each of this is a cell for, like a hostel where the bhikshus can stay. At the end of it, there is a shrine here. So around it, this is the hall, and that same plan, the vihara plan of one end shrine, then cells around it, and so on. And this is the Buddha statue inside. It is, of course, demolished now, but this is what remains of the main Buddha shrine. You can see it is a giant kind of Buddha, not a small Buddha. It is one of the monasteries. As I said, there are 4 monasteries, 4 viharas inside this, and this is the entrance to one of the monasteries. This is the vihara at Ratnagiri. So you can see the scale of the place again. So இங்க தான் doorway. இந்த doorway நம்ம பார்க்க போறோம். அங்க தான் shrine. இந்த shrine நம்ம பார்க்க போறோம். But this is the scale of the so there are something like 40 odd cells around it. So it could have easily accommodated 80 to 100 people in terms of the number of bhikshus who are living there. The Ratnagiri Vihara has always been called Sri Ratnagiri Vihara. So we saw that in the case of Lalitagiri, it was called Sri Chandraditya Vihara. In the case of Ratnagiri, it has been, that name seems to have remained as Ratnagiri, giving rise to a conclusion that it is a fairly ancient name. Now, this has an extremely beautiful doorway. So as soon as you go, I showed you this place, in the padi area அங்க போய் நின்றோம்னா, you see this extremely beautiful doorway. In fact, Debala Mitra, who sort of excavated this and who was head of ASI at one time, has called it unparalleled among structural monasteries in India. So we'll take a little bit of a close-up here. So you can see this doorway alone. This doorway has 3 different types of decorations, decorative patterns. Yeah, the innermost pattern is a set of vines. It's called, each of them has a technical name, Ratikera, and then these are stylized lotuses. right? They are called Padma Prishta. And the last one is the most joyful and happy one. It's called the Gelaba. It is just boys climbing, young boys climbing trees. So this is a common theme across Orissa. So if you go to Konarak, that temple behind, that huge place, there are boys climbing up and up and up and up, right? So it's a very, so you can see this is also. So this is what the gateway looks like. You can see that the top, right, this is a Buddhist monument, and in the top, in the lintel, Yarraka, Gajalakshmi, right? So Gajalakshmi as a theme seems to have been adopted across multiple
Buddhism, Jainism?
everybody, right? So, yeah, so you can see the Gajalakshmi there, and must have been a particularly large Lakshmi because the elephants are standing on a platform of lotuses to be able to bathe her. And you can see the intricacy of the carving on the chloride stone there. So you find different Buddhist icons. We will talk of some of them a little later. These are all in the wall there, in the gateway. At the bottom of the gateway, you have these extremely nice Dwarapalas, who are. This is actually a king of some sort. This is somebody holding an umbrella for him, and so on. Then we have these, again, fairly beautifully carved Buddhist icons. ஸோ இவங்கெல்லாம் யார் எல்லாம் மொரலஸ் ஒரே மாதிரி இருக்காங்க. இவங்கெல்லாம் யாருங்கிறத நம்ம பார்க்க போகிறோம். பட் திஸ் இஸ் ஜஸ்ட் ஃபார் அ குவிக் திங். திஸ் இஸ் அவலோகிதேஸ்வரா ஆர் பத்மபாணி, திஸ் இஸ் வஜ்ரபாணி, அண்ட் திஸ் இஸ் தாரா. அண்ட் வி வில் டேக் அ லுக் அட் த டூ bodhisattvas a little later. So you can see some of the ornamentations, for example, and the belt one over there, there is the loose ends are, sort of on both sides, the loose ends are there. In the middle there is a clasp, so I don't know if it is visible from that distance, but it's a very beautifully done here. The necklaces, the kundalas, they're all extremely nicely done. And they stand on what is known as a Vishwa Padma, which is a double lotus. So உள்ள போன உடனே இந்த ஷ்ரைனில் அதுக்கு திருப்பியும் டோர்வே, அதுக்கு திருப்பியும் துவாரபாலாஸ், and inside you can see the shadow of the Buddha here. If you go inside, these are the Dwarapalas that I talked of. So Maitreya, and this is the actual Dwarapala, and these are others there. There is a Naga who's featured quite frequently. So inside the shrine of Ratnagiri, this is what we see. Once we go inside that, there is a central Buddha who's seated, and he is flanked by two bodhisattvas. This one is Padmapani, and that is Vajrapani. So who they are, again we will discuss very shortly. So again, as I keep saying, it's a large place. This whole thing would have been roofed, but here they are. Everything is just kept out in the open. So all these are statues, all these little ones. And this is the doorway that we just saw from the outside. This is from the inside. Once you go in, this is, if you turn around and see it from the shrine, this is what you see. This particular thing is a back door which has simply been put there. This is not part of a structure now. It is just there for us to see. And this is and we saw several temples in Bhubaneswar looking exactly like this, so which are all 10th century temples. So this is a 10th century activity that has been. So that is the Ratnagiri Vihara. So beautiful doorway, gateway, and then inside the stupas. This is the Vihara at Udayagiri. Udayagiri has two hills. Udayagiri 1 was known as Sri Madhavapura Mahavihara, and Udayagiri 2 was known as Sri Simhaprastha Mahavihara. So there are two viharas. Same thing, right? Doorway, shrine, all of that. So the plan is the same. This is the actual plan of the Udayagiri Vihara. It was a 2-storied vihara. There is even a staircase still there at one end, which you can climb. Of course, you climb to nowhere. There is no first floor. Gateway once again. But here you can see that the Lakshmi has been replaced by a Buddha. So the lintel actually has a Buddha there instead of the Gajalakshmi that we saw in the other place. Nagas, holding this extremely pretty ghatas and so on. So this is the other monastery. Again, another large Buddha sitting there. This is a closer view of the Buddha. So just to summarize, these were the three places that we saw: Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri. Lalitagiri is the oldest. We saw the stupa which had those relics. We saw the chaitya that is there, which is the only chaitya that is there in there. And we saw the viharas. In Ratnagiri, we saw this vihara, which is a beautiful doorway and so on. Number of votive stupas. Udayagiri is the youngest of the lot. We saw this special stupa and also some of the other statues. So these are the structures. But more important than the structures are the icons that are there. Right? Across all three places, there are extremely beautiful Buddhist icons. And now we will see the Buddhist icons. The source for much of what I am going to show is from this book called Iconography of Buddhist Sculpture of Orissa by a man called Donaldson. This is the man. He is standing there in Ratnagiri. Thomas Eugene Donaldson is a professor at University of Cleveland, Ohio. And he's done a hell of a lot of work in entire Orissa. This is his book about the Buddhist iconography. He has written about the official ASI book on Konark is by him. He has written books on the Vishnu and the Vaishnava iconography as well. He's done a lot of research all in Orissa. Excellent work. Some of the pictures that I'm going to show here will be black and white because inside many of those sculptures are in the museums and we are not allowed to take photographs in the museum. So I have used scanned pictures from this book. Okay. So early Buddhist images till about the 6th century, Pathingana, the Buddha is not shown. There is no Buddha. Right? You only have symbols representing Buddha. Right? So you have feet, you have the Dharma Chakra, you have the throne, you have the Bodhi tree, you have the stupa, and so on. Stupa Vandana. So there will be a big stupa and there will be two ladies sort of praying to that. So all their sculptures in Sanchi, in Barhut, etc., you don't have any visual representation of Buddha. Then we start getting reliefs of stories of the Buddha, right? The Jataka tales. So first again the Buddha is shown as one among the crowd. Then slowly the Buddha becomes larger than the people around him, right? Implying that he is more important than the people around him. So this is in line with the early Buddha thinking. Buddha himself did not want anybody to worship him, did not want to be thought of as a god. In fact, the early Buddhists only thought of him as a Mahapurusha, that is all, not necessarily as a god. So we see these kinds of Buddha stories, etc., in the Amaravati sculptures when we go to the Madras Museum. Then slowly we start to get the standing Buddha. And again, there is always this debate about whether it started off in Gandhara first or whether it started off in Mathura. Broadly in the same period. At that period, we have both Gandhara and Mathura, the standing Buddhas. Then there are the Gupta Buddhas, which are those sinuous, very natural, elegant kind of Buddhas. So all this is pre the Buddhas that we are going to see. In Lalitagiri, Ratnagiri, we start to get Buddhas and other sculptures from the 6th century onwards. So it takes off from where the Guptas left. So we see standing Buddhas, we see seated Buddhas, we see what we call Dhyani Buddhas, we see Bodhisattvas, we see Mandalas, we see Devis, and there are a whole lot of sculptures. As you saw, Engapathalam, the sculptures are just strewn about in the open, right? So we have seen that. And some of them are also preserved in the museum. So what are these Buddhist icons, right? So we'll take a quick look at and try to understand what they are. Things. One difficulty is that there is very little variation in iconography in the early times. Subsequently, once the Mahayana and the Vajrayana icons start coming, then there are differences. But in the early days, everything looks very similar, as you will see. So dating is always done by style in most of these sculptures. Okay, we start with the Buddha. Right? We've all seen the Buddha. So Buddha's features are defined by what are known as the Mahapurusha Lakshanas. There are 32 Mahapurusha Lakshanas, according to which he must be, his sculptures must be done. We won't go into all 32, but some of them are very, very visible, and we know that. For instance, hair should be short. Right? In fact, this short hair Buddha led to the initial confusion of the French and the British archaeologists in the Central Asian region to think of Buddha as somebody from Africa. Right? So, hair should be short, Sunicha Kesha, and the hair is always in the Valamburi form. It is shown. So, Dakshina Avarta Murdaja is what it's called. So, the hair thing is you start like this and then you, it's an anti-clockwise coil that you have. And typically in the large touch, this is a large head, right? So, there will be typically about 8 to 9 rows of these curls will be there. Then on top of it, this will have another 3-4 rows. So, that is how the Buddha's face is shown, right? Now, this is not a konda, it is a cranial protuberance. So, this is the cranium of the Buddha. There's a protuberance there, and it's called the Ushnisha, and it is supposed to symbolize his attainment of enlightenment. So, it is not it's not part of his hair. Then there is also a small dot that you will see here, which looks like a pottu. That pottu is also not a pottu. It is called an urna, and it is a curl of hair. And some people say it is a third eye and may have been introduced to compete with Shiva and all of that, but we won't go there. But it is just, it's enough to remember that it is not a pottu. So it is always shown between the eyebrows here. Now, another common feature of Buddha is the long ear lobes. But the long earlobes are not part of the Mahapurusha Lakshanas. That is merely to remind us, and it is there in many other our sculptures as well, of royal personages, because the weight of the jewels that they are wearing, their earlobes become long. Right? So Buddha was a prince, remember? So to show that he has a long earlobes. So like this, there are several Buddha faces. You saw all those large Buddhas. Many of those don't have the head. The heads are available in various places in Ratnagiri, and especially in Ratnagiri. Yeah. So from there we go to the standing Buddhas. Remember I said standing Buddha started off where the Guptas left. So this is almost a Gupta period kind of thing. This is the hints of that same, the naturalness and the plasticity, the elegance and so on. Typically standing Buddhas are shown like this. There is an Abhaya Hasta, right? And there is, the left hand is holding his Uttriyam or Uttarasanga. And typically they are all like this. Right? The variations will be, sometimes there is a Varada Hasta. Sometimes in this back slab, which are plain because they are very early time, you have some Vidyadharas or some flying things there. All of these are from Lalitagiri, because Lalitagiri has the most conservative sculptures, meaning the earliest as well as simplest of these sculptures. As you go to Ratnagiri, you find a lot more of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana pantheon. So, yeah. So, standing Buddhas are the earliest. Somewhere along the way, Buddha was asked to sit down, right? So, maybe it stood long enough. So, he was asked to sit down. But the moment he was asked to sit down, they began to classify the Buddha, right? And we start getting a classification of a Buddha sitting like this versus a Buddha sitting like that. And those are known as the Tathagata Buddhas or the Dhyani Buddhas, right? So, by about the 3rd century CE, there was a Buddhist text called the Guhya Samaja. And the Guhya Samaja talked of a new way of thinking about the Buddha. We said that earlier the Buddha was not God, the Buddha was merely a Purusha, maybe a Mahapurusha and so on. But this was now almost 1,000 years from Buddha, right? From actual historical Buddha. So by now things had changed. People wanted to show the Buddha as a God. So this Guhya Samaja talks of the Adi Buddha. The Adi Buddha is not a personage, it's not a physical person, it is a principle from which emanated several Buddhas, right? And each of those Buddhas created a family of their own, a Kula. So these Buddhas are called the Kulesa Buddhas. The Kulesa Buddhas were then classified into 5 and given various things to identify them, right? So first they were given a symbol, they were given a mudra, they were given a direction, they were given bodhisattvas, they were given a syllable, they were given a consort, they were given a vehicle, they were given all of this. So this started expanding the kind of identification for the Kulesa Buddhas or the Dhyani Buddhas, right? Our interest is basically in this and the mudra that they are. So the Vairochana, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha and Amoga Siddhi are the Dhyani Buddhas, the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and each of them were progenitors of a kula of bodhisattvas. We'll come to that. Right? There is, in some texts, is also known as the Tathagata Buddhas. The Tathagata is a fairly complex concept, which is not very clear even now. It could mean Tathagata or Tata Agata. So one who has thus come or one who has thus gone. And one interpretation is Tathagata is beyond all coming and going. So it is more the philosophy of who the Buddha is. So these Dhyani Buddhas, as I said, have 2 main things from our perspective. One is they have a mudra and they have a direction. Just like we have directions associated with our gods. So Vairochana is the Dharmachakra mudra, Akshobhya is the Bhumisparsha mudra, Ratnasambhava is the Varada mudra, Amitabha is in the Dhyana mudra, and Amoga Siddhi is in the Abhaya mudra. And they are placed like this. So the Akshobhya is in the east, then Ratnasambhava is in the south, Amitabha in the west, Amoga Siddhi should be in the north, and in the center we have Vairochana. So in a stupa, and we'll come to that later, this is the idea of placing the Buddhas around the stupa. So let us see these 5 Dhyani Buddhas very quickly, and then we'll move on. So the Buddha in Bhumisparsha mudra, that is touching the earth touching mudra, is called Akshobhya. So this is from the Ratnagiri central shrine. Akshobhya is the Buddha who's touching. So what is Bhumisparsha? Right? So Bhumisparsha mudra is a very important mudra in Buddhism because it has a story attached to it, and it has, of course, many of the stories around Buddha is built around this villain Mara. Right? Mara is a kind of, in Hindu Puranas we have different types of asuras and different types of enemies to kill, whereas by and large the Buddhist tales, Mara is a kind of integrated villain. Right? He sort of comes in, he is evil, he torments Buddha, he tortures Buddha, he taunts Buddha, he does everything to Buddha for Buddha to come through. So as Buddha was about to, as the Gautama sat in meditation, Mara brought his most beautiful daughters to seduce him and to make sure he does not reach enlightenment. Then he sent vast armies of monsters to attack him, but Siddhartha Gautama was just motionless. Then Mara said, the seat of enlightenment is for me. My spiritual accomplishments are much greater than yours. Immediately his entire army, thousands and millions of people said, yes, we bear witness to Mara's accomplishments. We are all witnesses to Mara's accomplishments. Then they asked Gautama Buddha, who is witness to your accomplishment? To which the Buddha touched the earth, right, and sought the earth's endorsement, and the earth wrote back, I bear witness. That is the story of the Bhumisparsha mudra of, with the earth roaring back that it is Buddha's witness, Mara and his armies vanished and Buddha reached enlightenment. So therefore the Bhumisparsha, touching the earth mudra, is very important to the entire Buddhist pantheon. So you will find this. This is the Udayagiri sanctum. If you go in, you find this. Typically, seated Buddhas sit in what is known as the Vajraparyanka asana, where both soles of both feet face upwards. Right? Rendu padangalu mel nokki irukkuriya oru position they are sitting. So this is also Bhumisparsha. He is touching the ground. So it is sometimes the arm is long enough to touch the ground. Sometimes it is just placed on the knee to indicate touching the ground. You may not be actually touching the ground. There are variations of Akshobhya. So you start getting these Vidyadharas around, you start getting other Dhyani Buddhas around, and so on. But broadly the same issue of touching the ground. So here he is almost touching the ground, here he is practically there. Then you get more variations. So this is your basic Akshobhya. Then you have Bodhisattvas. So here you have Bodhisattvas plus Dhyani Buddhas and so on. So basically the pantheon gets expanded as time goes along. The next Buddha or the next Mudra is the Vairochana with the Dharmachakra Mudra. So the Dharmachakra Mudra is actually the full form is Dharmachakra Pravartana Mudra. That is the turning of the wheel is the Dharmachakra Pravartana. And it symbolizes the first sermon of the Buddha, which he did in a park or forest or whatever in Sarnath. So therefore, whenever the Buddha is shown, or very often when he is shown in Dharmachakra Mudra like this, a wheel or something associated with Sarnath is also shown in the early Dharmachakra Mudra sculptures. Right? So you can see the wheel here, it is quite small. You can also see it in the next one in a Prayoga. So Dharmachakra Mudra was the most popular in the earliest period. Then that got replaced with the Bhumisparsha as time went along. So the earliest Buddhist sculptures have Dharmachakra and Vairochana, and subsequently you have the Akshobhyas. So here you can see, because it is Sarnath, it is all deer park, the deer park in Sarnath, so there is deer, and this chakra is here, but in Prayoga Chakra, it's like this, right? It's not like this, but like this. More versions of the same, Dharmachakra Mudra and Vairochana. The third Dhyani Buddha is called the Amitabha. Amitabha is in Dhyana Mudra, right? So this is simple Dhyana Mudra. So you will see Buddhas. So while all Buddhas look alike, each Buddha is actually different when you go look at what they are doing. So this is Buddha Amitabha. And but the Dhyana Mudra is a slightly misleading one, because several icons in Buddhism are shown with the Dhyana Mudra. So they may not always be Amitabha, there may be others also. We will have to watch out for other aspects as well. So here is an Amitabha with some Bodhisattvas here. Nagas are there at the bottom and so on. This is we saw in Udayagiri. This is Amoga Siddhi. Amoga Siddhi has his right hand in Abhaya Mudra. Right? So Buddha in Abhaya Mudra is known as Amoga Siddhi. And finally, the Varada Mudra Buddha. So these are seated Buddhas. The seated Buddhas in different mudras. The Varada Mudra Buddha is called Ratna Sambhava among the Dhyani Buddhas. So to summarize, we have Akshobhya with Bhumisparsha, we have Vairochana with Dharmachakra Pravartana Mudra, we have Ratna Sambhava with Varada, Amoga Siddhi with Abhaya, and Amitabha as Dhyana Mudra. So these are the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. So broadly, all seated Buddhas will fall in one of these 5 categories. Right? So when you see a seated Buddha, it is easy for you to identify based on the mudra where they are. Fine. So these are all from within the museums of or lying around in Ratnagiri and Udayagiri area. Next, after Buddhas, so we looked at the Buddha face, we looked at the standing Buddhas, we looked at the seated Buddhas, which are all Dhyani Buddhas. The next set of people are the Bodhisattvas, right? The icons that we see are Bodhisattvas. So who are Bodhisattvas? So before we go to that, Buddhism has always had multiple schisms and sects, right? So in India, if you take in India, you have the early Sangha, but starting here, you have what are known as early Buddhist schools. These schools are called Nikayas. Nikaya Buddhism is a Buddhism when in the Sangha rules, the Vinaya that is there in the Buddhist rules, the rules for forming a chapter, let us say, a Lions Club chapter kind of thing, are very explicit. So they say some 5-6 bhikshus join together and they agree they can set up one school. So like this, we have several monastic lineages that are established with differences either in geography, differences in some minor practices, etc. starting very early. So we are talking of within 100-150 years of the Buddha's passing away, we already have these schools, different schools. Now, these schools agree on most things about Buddhism, but they want their own. It may be like the various, say, madams that we have here, in the GR, and the GR, and so on. So, on the Mari, that monastic lineage is what is there. However, some of it starts getting more hardened into what is known as Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is, Thera is merely a senior elder bhikshu. Comes from the Sanskrit word Stavira. So Theravada Buddhism becomes more and more orthodox. They start talking of, for example, showing the Buddha is not something that they approve of, and so on. So much Theravada Buddhism actually goes out to Sri Lanka. It goes as early as Ashoka's time, because he sends his son or son-in-law, the case may be, of Mahinda, who goes to Sri Lanka and establishes Theravada Buddhism. And from Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka, South and Southeast Asia, that is your Burma, your Thailand, your Vietnam, and so on, Buddhism does not go from India, it goes from Sri Lanka. And therefore, even today, they are all Theravada Buddhists. As time goes along, these Buddhist schools begin to find more and more differences from Theravada, and slowly a type of Buddhism known as Mahayana Buddhism emerges. Right? The schools of Buddhism in East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, etc., go from India, not from Sri Lanka, and those are Mahayana Buddhisms. Right? As again time goes on, many of these Mahayana practices in India itself start to get influenced by the tantric practices, which actually are quite old, but they come out into the open somewhere around the 8th, 9th century. Right? So then you get Vajrayana Buddhism. And Vajrayana Buddhism is the last part of Buddhism that is there in India before it moves to Tibet and moves from there to Central Asia. So the Tibetan Buddhism is more or less, in general, Vajrayana Buddhism. Of course, by the 12th century, all of this is over. In India at least. Right? So this is how the Buddhist schools or the various sects, early Theravada Buddhism, the Nikaya Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana and Vajrayana. Now, if you remember our Ratnagiri, Lalitagiri, the bulk of it was in this 7th, 10th century. Therefore, we get a lot of Vajrayana and Mahayana sculptures in Ratnagiri, Lalitagiri. So, what is the difference? What is the big deal about Mahayana? So, the Theravada, as I said, are very orthodox people, right? For them, the aim is to attain enlightenment. For whom? For myself. They say that itself is a very difficult thing. To make the effort for attaining enlightenment or nirvana for myself is a big thing, so that is my focus. They are saying we will not be able to take the responsibility for your enlightenment. Right? The Mahayana Buddhists came back and said, no, that is a very selfish view. Therefore, the Mahayanas then called themselves Mahayana. Mahayana means the greater vehicle. And then, positioned the Theravadins as Hinayana. Hinayana means smaller vehicle, lesser vehicle. Right? So, no, there is no Hinayana Buddhism, meaning nobody calls themselves Hinayana, but it is a term applied by, a pejorative term applied by the Mahayanas on the Theravadins to say, you're Hinayana, you're Hinam because for us, compassion towards others, concern for others, and enlightenment of others is more important. And therefore, instead of becoming what was known as Pratyeka Buddha or an Arhat, that is the enlightened one, right? They said, we will create a class of people or a place where we will postpone our own attainment for the sake of helping others to attain enlightenment, right? In a very crude way, right? So, being who has taken a vow to be reborn. So, what is the final aim of enlightenment? Not to be reborn. No matter how many times it may be necessary, we will be reborn because we want nirvana for the benefit of all sentient beings. Such a person who has postponed his own nirvana, so to speak, for others is called a bodhisattva. He has not yet become a Buddha. He has stopped short of it. He will one day become a Buddha, but today he is a bodhisattva in the service of all humankind and all sentient beings. So that is the bodhisattva. So the bodhisattvas start appearing in icons from around the 5th, 6th centuries. And as the practice of Tantric Buddhism started in Eastern India especially, there are more and more bodhisattvas. So there is a tremendous explosion of bodhisattvas as you go along. By the 10th century, you have hundreds of bodhisattvas, different names, each coming from a different kula. So bodhisattvas typically accompany the Buddha in all subsequent icons. They can come in mandalas and they can come as main deities. So we will see some of the major bodhisattvas. The good thing about bodhisattvas is, how do you tell the difference between a bodhisattva and a Buddha? Is that there will be a seated Dhyani Buddha in the front of the bodhisattva's coffin. Right? So this is a type of Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara comes from the family of Amitabha. So there is a small Amitabha here. So all bodhisattvas have in the front of their head or coffer a small Dhyani Buddha. Sometimes it may be one off, so you may not be able to see it. So we will see, there are several, as I said, several bodhisattvas, but we will see only the 3-4 main ones because they are more popular. The first one is the Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara is probably the most popular bodhisattva around, all over Asia as well. He is also known as Lokeshvara, and because he is holding on to this lotus, he is also known as Padmapani. Right? So Avalokiteshvara's spiritual father or Kulesha Buddha is Amitabha. Avalokiteshvara means he who is looking down in compassion. Most important attribute of Avalokiteshvara, to identify an Avalokiteshvara, is a lotus. The lotus may be either facing the Avalokiteshvara himself or facing the viewer. So you can see that lotus here, you can see that lotus here. So that is in the left hand. The right hand can hold, Ingavandi is holding a chamaram. Typically, when the bodhisattva is shown as an attendant of Buddha, and the kaila oru chamara irukkum. So here he is shown as an attendant of Buddha. Here he simply has a Varada Mudra. Right? So Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara is the second Bodhisattva to be mentioned in all Buddhist scriptures. The earliest being Manjushri, we'll come to him a little later. He is supposed to have emanated from Amitabha, and today he is the ruling deity of the present Kalpa, which is known as Bhadra Kalpa in Buddhism. That is, from the disappearance of the last Manusha Buddha, that is the Gautama, till the next Buddha who is going to come, which is Maitreya. Now, Avalokiteshvara is supposed to have manifested himself 333 times, right, according to the literature. So, therefore, a very, very large variations are there. Enormous number of Avalokiteshvaras are there. So, most of the things that you see sometimes as bodhisattvas, one guess would be if there is a lotus, it's an Avalokiteshvara, regardless of what his other hands are doing, right? So, let's see some samples. So, this is called Jata Makuta Lokeshvara. The lotus is there. This we saw in Udayagiri. Extremely beautiful statue, and these are the Manusha Buddhas who are supposed to have preceded the Gautama Buddha. Gautama Buddha is a Manusha Buddha, and these Manusha Buddhas were supposed to have come before him. Right? So they have various names, never mind what they are. So this is a very beautiful Avalokiteshvara in the form of Jatamukata Lokeshvara. So if you go close enough to the top, you will see the Amitabha on his coffer. More beautiful Lokeshwaras and or Avalokiteshwaras. You can see the lotus. The lotus is key. Right? Apart from that, of course, there is the Yajnopavita, there are beautiful clasps and ornaments, his necklace, his Jatamukata is here, and so on. This is what we saw in Ratnagiri. We saw this photo earlier as well. So you can see that the original, this fellow here, Avalokiteshvara, is two-armed, right? These are all two-armed. Now we've got four-armed, yeah. So the variations, as I mentioned, of Avalokiteshvara are many. So there are four-armed versions as well, typically holding an Akshamala, a Kamandalam here, in Varada Mudra here, and of course the Padmapani. So here, his fourth arm here is holding a massive noose. So here he is called Amoga Pasha Lokeshvara. So this is also a Lokeshvara. You can see the lotus flower facing him. Right? This is there in Ratnagiri again. This is a seated Lokeshwara with you can see the lotus here, it's in the shadow. This is on that wall of Ratnagiri that we saw, doorway. Okay, so that is the single most important Bodhisattva, popular everywhere you will find him, the Avalokiteshvara or Padmapani. The second most popular is Vajrapani. For his spiritual father is Akshobhya. Akshobhya is the Bhumisparsha Dhyani Buddha. Very frequently, when Buddha is seated, you will find to his right Padmapani and to his left Vajrapani. Right? So what is his major attribute? It's the Vajra. The Vajra is a thunderbolt. Right? So all of you know the Vajrayudham. It is normally placed on top of not a lotus but a blue lotus, which is the Nilotpala. And again, the right hand does various things, that case may be. So this is the Vajrapani. You can see the Vajram on top of the Nilotpala. This is the two-armed Vajrapani. This is the four-armed Vajrapani. Once again, you can see the Vajra on the Nilotpala. Both these are in Ratnagiri. So here is another interesting Vajrapani, where the Vajram is not on top of the flower, it is held in the hand. It's a seated Vajrapani, but holding the Vajram. So if you go into the shrine of, we've already seen this picture, this is the most common way of depicting Buddha. Buddha is seated, most likely as an Akshobhya, and to one side is Padmapani, one side is Vajrapani. This is probably, in most places, this is how the Buddha will look. The third Bodhisattva is a very interesting Bodhisattva. He is Manjushri. Manjushri is actually the oldest Bodhisattva in terms of mention in the Buddhist canon. His spiritual father is also Akshobhya. He is a Bodhisattva of wisdom. Therefore, his major attribute, instead of a Vajram, there is a book or a collection of palm leaves or whatever you may call them on top of the Nilotpala. Right? He has a very interesting hairstyle. It's called Kakapaksha, that is the wings of a crow. So three bundles, his hair is shown, 1, 2 and 3. And he is normally seen as a youthful kind of person, right? So to show youth, they have these things, this hairstyle, which hasn't changed much in our life, I suppose. Right? And the jewelry, there is normally a Vyagranaka, that is a tiger claw, which is shown as his necklace. And he has a Patra Kundalam in one ear, and so on. So Manjushri, again, is described very in great detail in a book called Arya Manjushri Mulakalpa, which is as old as the 4th century, several variations and so on. He is considered a parallel to Kartikeya, right? The youthfulness, the Vyagranakam and so on and so forth are all part of the Manjushri's iconography. So you can see a lot of Manjushris. You can see that basically it looks very different, like sort of cool kind of guy. Once again, you can see the Vyagranaka, you can see the Patra Kundalam there, close up of the Patra Kundalam. And on top of the Nilotpala, there is a typical book. This is from the museum. I just wanted to show you because the hairstyle was once again very... this is in Bhubaneswar, this is not in Lalitagiri. And you can see the book being placed here on top of the... The fourth is Maitreya. Now Maitreya is both a Buddha and a Bodhisattva. He can be shown as a Buddha as well as a Bodhisattva. This is the Bodhisattva image that we are seeing. Where is Maitreya? Maitreya is waiting to become the next Buddha, according to the Buddhist ideology. He is now in a place called Tushita heaven, which is one of the 31 heavens that Buddhists have. He is shown mainly with, in the இடத்துல வந்து நம்ம என்ன சொன்னோம், there will be a Dhyani Buddha ன்னு சொன்னோம். But Maitreya himself being a kind of Buddha, Maitreya is shown with a stupa here, not with another Buddha. Right? So if you see a Bodhisattva with a stupa here, it is Maitreya. And he is shown with a flower. This flower is called the Nagakeshara flower. This is the flower. This tree is the national tree of Sri Lanka. So this is the flower that you see. So basically, we saw 4 Bodhisattvas. Avalokiteshvara with the lotus. We saw Vajrapani with the Vajram. We saw Manjushri who's with the youthfulness, the book, the Vyagranaga necklace, and so on. And we saw Maitreya, who is both Bodhisattva and Buddha. There are others, I won't go into them. So finally we come to mandalas. What are mandalas? So in Vajrayana, this whole idea of assembling icons in a certain pattern to evoke their power became very popular. So there are 4 stages of invoking a deity. You experience emptiness of the mind, then you experience the deity as sound, as a mantra, and then you experience an inward vision of the deity. So you want to invoke the deity in your mind, and that is where the mandala comes in. And this mandala, by chanting or by focusing on the mandala, you invoke the deity. Right? And there is a whole range of literature called sadhana literature, where people do these sadhanas to become siddhas, right? So to get the siddhi, where the mantra for each mandala is given, where how to invoke the god is given, deity is given, how long it should be done is given, what are the disciplines to be followed is given, and so on. And one of the most important texts for that is called Nispanna Yogavali, which is in the 10th century text. So this is typically a mandala. There is a central deity with lots of deities around. This is typical of Tibetan art. So this is called a Hevajra mandala. So this is a very typical kind of mandala. So you have a series of concentric circles where 1, 2, 3, 4 concentric circles. The outermost ring is often shown as fire. Then you have a ring of Vajras. Then you have this palace. This is called the mandala palace. This has 4 walls. And within that you have a Raksha Chakra. These are people who are protecting the central deity. In this case, the central deity is He Vajra. And so many other parts of it. So the main deity can vary. So the main deity in one mandala can become the subsidiary deity in another mandala and so on. So this is the main mandala. Now mandalas in the place that we visited come in 2 forms. Form 1 is a stupa mandala and form 2 is the sculptural Shilpa mandala. Remember I talked about this? So this is a mandala stupa. This is in Udayagiri, right? And how does it become a mandala? Because in center you have the stupa and around the 4 you have the combination of Buddhas. So who are these? So in the east you have the Akshobhya Buddha with 2 Bodhisattvas. So that is 3. Then in the west you have Amitabha Buddha with 2 Bodhisattvas, Lokeshwara and Vajrapani. In the south you have the Ratnasambhava Buddha with Samantabhadra, 2 more Bodhisattvas. So 3 into 4 directions you have 12. So you have a mandala of 12 Buddhas and Bodhisattvas forming that mandala around the stupa. So the stupa itself is a mandala in this case of Udayagiri. Right? So normally Vairocana should be in the middle, but in this case Vairocana is in the north. It's a very beautiful Vairocana that we see inside that gate. Of course today it is gated, which is why I am showing you this picture from the book. So this is one way of showing a mandala. The more common way is to show it around the seated Buddha or around the seated Bodhisattva. So you see this forms a mandala. This forms a mandala along with what is at the bottom. So in this case, this is a Vairocana, we know that, right? So you have a series of people around him, and these are the people, right? So there is Maitreya with that flower, there is Lokeshwara with the lotus, there is Manjushri with this fancy hairdo, there is Vajrapani with the Vajram, there is Akashagarbha and so on. So around all of this we have the sculptural mandala is formed like this. This is again from Udayagiri that we have seen it, and this is in Ratnagiri. It is locked, but you can sort of see the picture. Right, so in sum, we have seen stupas, we have seen chaityas, we have seen viharas, which are all structures. We have seen the Buddha iconography, we have seen standing and seated Buddhas, we have seen 5 Dhyani Buddhas, we have seen 4 Bodhisattvas, and we have seen the mandalas, both stupa mandalas and Shilpa mandalas. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Sorry? Though
you are telling it is the joint of the 2 eyebrows, but it is separately depicted in many pictures.
It is separate. It is not a joining of eyebrows. It is separate. It is seen either as a curl of hair, but it is not a pottu. That is all I was trying to.
But they show as red in the color itself. I see a lot
Maybe.
of pictures.
Possible. Quite possible. Yes, sir.
Buddha was a Kshatriya, Kshatriya king, prince. See, so they used to wear Yajnavidam. Many in later days, like our Tiruvallur, they covered this Yajnavidam with the cloth, Angastram. So these both are depicted as seen.
Sure. Sure.
But I don't know, I have not
In the olden, in the period that we see here, almost everybody has a Yajnapavitam. And you will see it is made up, sometimes made up of strings, sometimes made up of cloth, sometimes made up of beads, chains, different types of Yajnapavitam we can see. In fact, if you spend time on the jewelry and the coiffure and the hairstyle and all of that, that will take another 1 hour. So,
I have seen Darjeeling, there is one monastery. I have seen Sanchi or Sarnath. I don't remember Ratnagiri and Udayagiri. I have seen some Ashoka edit and all. But what I want to tell you regarding the Buddha, I forgot what I to say. Is, I remember it.
Sir, I have 3 questions.
yes, sir.
There is about Dakshina Avartam of the Jataka.
Yes, sir.
It's not that scorpion-like curves.
Um,
Something like that, no? The curves,
the curve is simply an anti-clockwise curve. That's all.
something like a scorpion style, like that's what it almost looks.
No, sir. It is just a simple anti-clockwise curve. Avladhan. It's not a very
Numbered,
complicated.
I read elsewhere it is numbered 365.
Um, It is possible in the larger Buddhas. If you see the smaller Buddhas, so in the larger Buddhas, typically you will find about 8 to 9 rows of hair where you can put 365. But in some of the smaller Buddhas, you won't have space for that many. Still, you will find about 3-4 rows only, starting from maybe a little lower in the forehead. You will find the hair shown, but you won't have space for so many curls. So you'll have much fewer in that. So 365 may be difficult if you look at any other smaller Buddha.
Another question. The stupa itself, modeled by Buddha himself, it resembles the upside down of the begging bowl.
Mm-hmm. That could be. I'm not so sure.
So I read it somewhere else. And finally, whenever we talk about the Bodhisattvas, we always associate with when Brahmadatta was ruling the Kasi Rajya, the Jataka stories evolved. What is association with them? Or you can tell me perhaps you might.
No, I'm not aware of the association of the Bodhisattvas with the Jataka tales. I have not read that much. So maybe you can.
All each Jataka story is associated with the Bodhisattva.
One, yeah.
And unfortunately, in the places that we saw,
There are no
there
Jataka tales.
Stories.
There are no Jataka tale stories.
Must have been there. It's all gone. You go to Ajanta, you can see that.
Correct.
For example, complete story with eventually a Bodhisattva giving
No,
sacrifice.
I repeat again. See, whenever Jataka story commences, it says whenever Brahmadatta was ruling over the Kasi Rajya, Buddha had gone something like that.
Now he's done something.
How it
Correct.
commences. That's all. That's it.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
commendable work.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I remember.
You remembered? Yes, sir.
I remember. This is Rudrakshamala. He is from Nepal.
Huh.
It's not even braided hair. It's a head covered with Rudrakshamala. Because he is hailing from Nepal.
This one, sir, no, sir. This is part of what they call the Mahapurusha Lakshanas. So it is hair. Hair is sort of specified as to how it should be shown.
There is a braided hair.
It is not braided. It is just it's a short hair, short curly hair. Fairly simple.
Second thing which I suddenly remember. Nobody remembers Buddha 300 years even later. Whole thing was resurrected 3 years after his death. When Buddha died at some Yachagam, pigs meat because of food poison. He was taken back to his place.
Sir,
That's given a
sorry to interrupt. இந்த கேள்வி வந்து it doesn't fit into
Yes.
Okay, come back.
this. அதனால can we let others
I'll come to it because he was given a Kshatriya's text on this.
sir அதுக்குள்ள போறோம்.
Just want to ask you now, from your study, all the starting Buddhas or in terms of iconography starts from 6th century. But we see
Starts from, sorry?
6th century is
Yeah.
So we already see the starting Indian Buddhas in Mathura region around 4 centuries before.
Correct.
And in the Gandhara region, at least to the 2nd century. So do you think that Buddhism came down to Orissa later, number one? And number two, how do you date it to 6th century? Because as we know, there are no stylistic comparisons for this art. So how is it that we date it as 6th century?
No, the reason for dating it for 6th century are two, only with stylistic. So if you see the standing Buddha there, it is very, very similar to the Gupta Buddhas, which you can see, whatever has been dated as Gupta Buddhas, that is one. Two, whether Buddhism came earlier, later to Orissa is the problem that we have. We don't know, except that we know, for instance, pottery shards from Lalitagiri can be dated back all the way up to 2nd, 3rd century. So at that time, what were the icons that were there? If it could be there in Sanchi and if it can be there in Amaravati, why not in Barhut, why not here? We don't have answers for that because even this linkage, as we said, with the 8th and 9th century is more because of, stray one or two copper plates here, one inscription here and so on, none of which is direct. Nothing actually says Ratnagiri was built by so and so on. So by indirect reference, we are making those conclusions that this is 8th century and 9th century. Secondly, it's only stylistic. Because as you go later on, the bodhisattvas and so on, you will not find the kind of depiction of bodhisattvas earlier. So therefore, they are saying it should be probably 10th, 11th centuries as you go forward. The earliest Buddhas are, if you see many of the Gupta Buddhas that are there, you will find there are more or less of this, the simplicity, the dress that is wearing, the transparent Uttarasanga, all of that is very Gupta style. So here they only say it taking off. If you see the word there, I have put hints of Gupta. That's all. It is not actual Gupta. The dimensions, the shoulders and so on, they have been analyzed by scholars. I am not a scholar. But whatever I have read, right. So whatever I have read says that there are hints of something having been taken from the Gupta legacy. That's how it is. Yeah. Please.
Just a commentary and thank you because during our school days, the lesson on Buddhism said there are two types of Buddhism, Mahayana and Hinayana. Just a commentary on the type of textbooks that we get. I don't know whether it stands corrected now. So I think when people want to rewrite history, I think they should be permitted.
Sure. Yes, sir. Ama.
Source எங்க இருக்கு? இதுதான் மகாபுருஷ லட்சணான source Buddhist literature-லயே இருக்கா இல்ல is it something from
It is, I forget from where I took it. I think there is some reference by Shyam Murthy when he talks of the Amaravati sculptures in Chennai Museum. If I remember right, somewhere from there I have taken it. But it is listed somewhere, yes. I don't know exactly. I don't remember where. Yeah, 1 minute, yeah.
the five Dhyani Buddhas
Yeah.
are basically classification because of the lineage difference or they have real philosophical differences?
There are differences as far as I understand in certain practices of worshipping them, and also the differences hardened afterwards. The original Dhyani Buddha inscription was given 3rd century CE, right? But really, their references to the Dhyani Buddha start coming only when Mahayana takes off, and actually Vajrayana takes off much later. So whether people have done this and then referred back to the 3rd century Guhya Samaja, or whether they... So how this pattern emerged is not very clear even in the Buddhist texts. So there seems to be the fact that, first of all, the Guhya Samaja dating itself is a lot of things, a lot of controversy. And finally it was settled because there are translations in Chinese. So it's not an Indian available text. It is something that came back from China, the Chinese text. So because the Chinese text is dated 3rd, 4th century, they are now saying, look, it was there all along. So the question was, if it was there all along, what was it doing till 7th century? So this question is still there. So they are saying, no, it was secretly worshipped and, because it was not popular, it was only after Mahayana people became brave and the Vajrayana started, etc., etc. So that question of what was Guhya Samaja and its text doing between 3rd century CE and 7th and 8th century CE is still unanswered actually. Yeah, somebody here.
Do you have any idea what kind of Buddhism practice in literature? Sirapudigaram, we have Madhuri practice.
I wouldn't know if there is any specific reference, but if you are talking of that period, it is more likely to have been early Mahayana or Theravada Buddhism, most likely early Mahayana Buddhism. Because your Nagarjuna and all of them are people already associated with the Mahayana tradition. Yeah.
So we were seeing different types of tools that they were holding right on the hand.
Yeah.
One is holding a Padma, one is holding a Vajrayana.
Correct.
So in Buddhist iconography, is there a specific meaning for these tools in a way that they actually lead them as a path, they actually depict these tools as a path for becoming a Buddha or becoming a enlightened?
Yeah. So, for instance, Manjushri is through wisdom. Right? Hence the book. Vajrapani and Vajra is through discipline and so on, which hence the Vajram. And he is also considered the most powerful Bodhisattva in the Vajrayana pantheon. Avalokiteshvara is through compassion, hence the lotus and so on. So the attribute that they are holding is part of what they bring to their to their nature. So that is very much a part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, one second.
Ma'am.
I don't remember whether it is Bangkok or Phuket, where one of those guides was telling, the size of the ears or the length of it depicts the age it belongs to. இங்க வந்து எல்லாமே uniformly long ones.
Yeah, I am not aware of the size representing age. Whether he means historical age? Historical age, no.
Century it belonged to.
It may. No, I am not aware of that. But there are some things in the Buddhas. For instance, if you see the Ushnisha, so if you see all the bronzes from Nagapatnam, suddenly there will be one flame there, which is not an original Buddhist feature. But all Nagapatnam bronzes, of which whatever the hoard that was found of 140, 150 bronzes, they all have the thing. So in those kinds of specific geographical variations, there are there in the Buddhist, but I don't know about this length of the ear. I'm sorry.
Last one again. Now in Orissa, when you go to Chandraketuga, for example, the ornamentation is much more elaborate from the 3rd century BC. And most of the works, the stone art of Chandraketuga, which probably predate this by about 600 years. So when you see the artwork of the early part, you see that the ornamentation is totally out. Do you think that because Buddhism, in the sense that they didn't want it? So I have read the local artisans were used to depicting people with heavy anklets and bracelets and all previously. So do you think that is the instance or they just copy?
I wouldn't be able to say for sure, but there is the fact that the early Buddhists did not want Buddha depicted at all. Forget decorating him with ornaments. They didn't want him to be depicted at all, which is why we don't have early Buddha depicted anywhere in any of the early thing. So it starts with relief from the Jataka tales. It's not, the reliefs are only to show some stories, like we have sometimes in stories, there is a Krishna story painted on our temple walls kind of thing, instead of the Krishna as the main deity of the temple or Rama as the main deity of temple. So from that position, they brought Buddha on to the kind of, ornamentation and things that we saw. 1. 2, Buddha is a prince. So there is a dichotomy of showing him as a prince and showing him as an ascetic. So Buddha himself will not have too much of ornamentation, except to show that he was a prince. We are saying that the ears are elongated, so because he was used to wearing those heavy jewelry, gold and things like that. But Buddha is seldom shown with ornamentation which is not becoming of an ascetic. So therefore, all the bodhisattvas have enough ornamentation, which we have seen, kundalas and kavachas and things like that. Possible. Correct. So it's possible that the origin Buddhism part did not pick it up. So I wouldn't know the exact answer for that. Yeah.
The school days we had, Hina means no idol. Mahaya means with idol. Two types of worship of Buddha. With idol, without idol. Mahayana, Hinayana. That's what they had in school days. But here, I don't find Hina. You saw some Vajrayana or something, some other name there.
Yeah, so Hinayana is the name applied by Mahayanis to Theravada Buddhism. Yeah.
Theravada means idol-less?
No, Theravada is merely the way of the Theras. The Theras are the senior Buddhist bhikshus. Even today, when the senior most Buddhist monk in a Buddhist vihara is called Thera. So Thera merely means senior bhikshu.
Was there any time idol-less worship of Buddha?
Yeah, in the beginning. In the beginning there was no idol. There was only representations of the Buddha. There were Bodhi trees, there were stupas, there were thrones, there were his feet alone was shown. All of that is there. You can see it, and if you go to Madras Museum, you will find large replicas of only his feet with the Srivatsas in the middle and so on. So, yeah, in the beginning there was no representation of Buddha.
Shyam,
Yeah.
you didn't show anything about Tara.
Yeah, I didn't show anything about Tara because it was getting very long, so I sort of chopped it off. I can show one particularly interesting Tara, which we didn't actually see there, but it's in the book. I don't know if it is here somewhere. So yeah, but I'll show you probably what is the most.
Details of it.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, so this is one Tara that is there. This is in Ratnagiri Museum. It's a very interesting Tara. It is called Ashta Mahabhaya Tara. The 8 big fears from which Tara will protect worshippers, right? And what are the fears? They are Sarpa Bhaya, which is here in the corner, right? Which is your snake, right? Simha Bhaya, fear of lions. And here is a Bhaya which is, continues after 2000 years also. There is that you will be mugged on your way home or something like that. Then your boat can sink, Jalarnava Bhaya. Then there is Agni Bhaya. Then there is Pisacha Bhaya. Then there is Bhaya of, look at this, the fettered man harassed by officials, right? So thrown into jail unlawfully and just so adamari panna kudade appadinte. And there is fear of the elephant. So this is a set of very interesting thing that we saw, that we actually didn't see this. Sorry. So Tara actually is a very interesting person. She is the equivalent of Durga. And there are 2 Taras. There is the white Tara, who is also known as Sita Tara. And there is a green Tara, who is known as the Shyama Tara. And they are linked with different bodhisattvas in different texts of Buddhism. So sometimes Tara is shown as the consort of Amoghasiddhi, sometimes of Avalokiteshvara, and so on. And there are simply hundreds of versions of Tara. There is Tara this, there is Tara that, there is seated Tara, there is standing Tara, there is 4-arm Tara, there is 8-arm Tara, and so on and so forth. So I have not gone into the Tara area at all because that is a separate lecture. Maybe one day I will study it a little more deeply and come. But she is the supreme goddess of Vajrayana. Sorry? Those are Ratnagiri, and the middle one is a Tara there. Yeah. In fact, there is one Tara called Durgotarani Tara, based on kind of Durga. Okay, thank you very much for coming today. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Very big
தேங்க்யூ ஷியாம். இது
நாங்கள் ஒரிசா போகிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி ரொம்ப இன்னும் எலாபரேட்டாகவே பண்ண ஒரு லெக்சர் வித் குவிஸ் கொஸ்டின்ஸ்லாம் இருந்தது. இது என்ன புத்தான்னு கண்டுபிடிங்க அப்படின்லாம். அது இன்றைக்கி வைக்கல. அது தட் வாஸ் வெரி ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல். அங்கே நேரில் போய் அந்த இடத்த பார்க்கும்பொழுது இந்த ஒரு பேக்ரவுண்ட் இருந்திருக்கலைன்னா அங்கே ஒன்றுமே புரிஞ்சிருக்காது. ஓகே, பட் ஈவன் தட் லெக்சர் வாஸ் நாட் சஃபிஷியன்ட். அந்த ஸ்கேல் நாங்கள் அங்கே பார்த்ததை வந்து அங்கே கிட்டக்க போகிறப்ப தான் வந்து இட் ரியலி ஹிட்டஸ். எவ்வளோ ஒரு பெரிய எக்ஸ்பான்ஸ். இதுக்கு முன்னாடி எங்களை சிலர் வந்து வேறு புத்திஸ்ட் லொக்கேஷன்ஸ்க்கெலாம் போயிருக்கோம். பர்டிகுலர்லி அஜந்தா நம்மள நிறையா பேர் போயிருக்கலாம். பட் திஸ் ஒன் இட்ஸ் லைக் இன் டர்ம்ஸ் ஆஃப் சைஸ், அஃப்கோர்ஸ் கட்டடமெல்லாம் போயிடுது. ஏன்னா அது ஒரு கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்டட் பில்டிங்காக இருந்ததுனால அதோடைய ஃபுல் க்ளோரியில் நம்மளால் அதை பார்க்க முடியல. பட் யூ கேன் சர்டன்லி இமேஜின் அங்கே என்ன மாதிரியான ஒரு புத்திசம் இருந்திருக்கணும், அந்த சைத்யாஸ் அண்ட் விஹாராஸ் அண்ட் ஸ்தூபாஸ்லாம் எப்படி இருந்திருக்கும் இன் இட்ஸ் ஹேடே அப்படிங்கிறத ஓரளவுக்கு பார்க்க முடிஞ்சுது. தேங்க்யூ ஷியாம் ஃபார் பிரிங்கிங் ஆல் ஆஃப் தட் பேக். நீட் ஸ்வீட் லெக்சர். தேங்க்யூ. தேங்க்ஸ் அலாட். Sorry, as usual, next month, first Saturday, there will be a lecture here. Thank you.
What?
It is live streamed this to Amma.
Which Amma? Yeah, I only sent her the link. Amma saw it.
Wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
எனக்கு ஒரே ஒரு டவுட்.